As states engage nationally and internationally on international investment agreements, I'd like to highlight the importance for all of us of taking a step back to reflect on our objectives with respect to international investment agreements. In general, states recognize investment policy as a key and critical way to promote inclusive economic growth and other development objectives. Conveniently, we have a shared framework to discuss those goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, agreed in 2015 by the world's governments, which provide a shared blueprint for achieving our economic, social, and environmental goals: ending poverty and hunger, promoting inclusive growth, preserving and protecting our environment, including our climate, reducing inequality in all of its forms, and so on. Each part of Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the Financing for Development Agenda, recognizes the critical role that investment plays in achieving the goals. We know, for instance, that investment is needed in critical areas of infrastructure, transportation, clean energy, health systems, information and communication technologies, and so on, and that investment can generate revenue, create jobs, and facilitate technology transfer, among other benefits, which is why so many countries seek to attract investment. But Agenda 2030 also recognizes the need to mitigate investment's harmful social and environmental impacts, locally, regionally, and globally. The extent to which investments are channeled into the sectors and geographies in which they're needed and have the benefits that are anticipated, and the extent to which the harms and impacts are avoided, depend on states' investment policies. Investment agreements can be seen as one of the tools in a government's toolkit, and specifically one to address questions of an international nature. In that sense, the question that could guide the role of treaties for governments is, what can usefully be agreed between or among countries to promote and shape sustainable investment, to limit and avoid harmful investment or impacts, to ensure that governments can properly govern investment, and to address issues of transnational governance of investment that cannot be addressed by any one government alone. Right now, most investment agreements are far off that mark. Most investment agreements include a standard set of investor protections based on 4 important and flawed assumptions. First, that offering additional investor protections, especially enforceable through investor-state dispute settlement, will attract more investment. Second, that investment will necessarily lead to sustainable development. Third, that the costs of investor protections are minimal, or at least less than the benefits. And fourth, that the costs and the benefits are equitably distributed within and across countries. The flaws of those assumptions are important. It has not been definitively demonstrated that investment protection agreements lead to greater investment flows. Many investments do not lead to sustainable development, and the investor protections offered in the investment agreements are disproportionately costly to host states and to their constituencies and interests. Our center, CCSI, and the OECD each have seminal studies cataloging the evidence of the uncertain benefits of international investment agreements against the substantial costs. So there's a major mismatch between the objectives of states in their investment policy and what current treaties look like and achieve. We propose that states could consider the following when considering whether to conclude or indeed whether to withdraw from investment agreements or when contemplating reforms. Do existing agreements or could future agreements help to catalyze, attract, or channel SDG advancing investments into the locations, sectors, and activities that are needed to achieve the SDGs? How can treaties ensure that they are not protecting investments that are not beneficial or that are harmful? How can treaties bolster trust in and the capabilities of domestic institutions, including courts and administrative bodies, to govern investment and to resolve disputes that might arise? And finally, how can treaties address some of the international challenges of investment governance that are hard for states to address on their own? For instance, the impacts of tax competition or tax avoidance or global antitrust issues or global environmental pollution and so on. Many ongoing discussions of treaty reform are narrowly focused on adjustments to the investor-state dispute settlement mechanism or bringing some precision to the substantive standards of investor protections. In our view, these discussions and processes are largely failing to take a critical step back to first ask what our 21st century objectives of investment treaties are, and second, how best to achieve those objectives, which might imply a different set of reforms or way forward. So in summary, we encourage states to take a step back and to reflect on the objectives of investment treaties, and specifically how they can help to advance the SDGs in each country. The questions I offered can usefully serve as a guide for possible new treaties, as well as a framework by which to assess existing treaties. We welcome continued discussion and reflection on aligning international investment agreements with the Sustainable Development Goals.